Hello, and welcome to another session of Fortinet Live. My name is Jonathan Nguyen. I'm a VP and a field CISO here at Fortinet, and today I am joined by Derek Menke, the head of FortiGuard Labs, and we're going to talk about what's happening in ransomware, the evolution of that particular threat vector, and how we can go about defending against it. So, hey, Derek, welcome to Fortinet Live. How are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing awesome as every day. Never a dull day in the office, and we've been on the front lines fighting this threat you're talking about with ransomware on a daily basis.
My God, where's your superhero cape?
it's off camera in the closet. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us about it. You're on the front lines, you and your team. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, so there's been, this is no secret now. This has just exploded in the sense of these new ransom as a service models, ransomware that's really going after big game hunting now, the big fish, right? This wasn't the case 10 years ago. I mean, when ransomware really broke onto the scene, it was circa about 2010. It was the volumetric attacks, right? Let's see what fish we land in our net, right? And that's what attackers were doing when they got to someone. They were just encrypting data. That was good enough. Data was a currency that they could, encrypt and offer them, decryptor for $500, $1,000. That's not the case anymore, right? People caught on to that. They started doing more rigid backups, from an administration standpoint. Now what we're seeing with these is that as a result of profits over 10 years, the snowball effect, they've got more weapons behind them. They've got more players, business units in these ransom gangs. They have deep pockets for these affiliate models. They're paying out commissions. Yep. And that means that these attacks now, it's a longer timeline. These are low and slow attacks, much like an APT. They're sitting on systems for months until they can actually find, pay dirt, which is going after IT systems, services now, where organizations will just bleed money.
Wow. Yeah, we've come a long way, but I think the old adage holds true, is that crime pays. That's why it occurs. And cybercrime pays extraordinarily well. It's even better than it has in the past. And so, going forward, I think the trajectory is that things are going to accelerate even faster, that things will become more complex, more effective. I hate to say it, right? And I think damages will go up. What are your thoughts moving forward? Have we seen this mature from ad hoc to now organized as a service, criminal syndicates? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at just the dollar figure on ransom payments themselves, that's going up. Again, we're not in the realm of $500 to $1,000. We're in the seven figures territory, right? And that's unfortunately becoming normal operations for them when they're hitting these, the big games. So I expect, unfortunately, they're seeing reward. The more they see the reward, the more that's going to happen. If we look at the profits they're making over time, that is an exponential curve, right? It hasn't flattened or plateaued. That continues to rise. It's a big problem in the industry. That's why we're working on these things with, Interpol and the World Economic Forum and things like that. That's the industry piece. But the reality is they've profited a lot. As a result, they're becoming more organized. They have more offshore accounts. Cryptocurrency platforms are fueling this as well, right? It's really acting as a catalyst too. So I fully expect more bad news to come on that front. Obviously, we're fighting it.
Yeah, for my friends who actually handle the negotiations with the threat actor, right? They tell me that by the time they go through all the different calls, the proofs, the validations, and they burn through the personas, they typically are dealing with the same people they deal with day in and day out, the same criminal organizations. They know exactly who they are. And it seems very much that this is business as normal in many ways. And this is very organized, and that the threat actors pride themselves on delivering quality of service, ironically, that you can trust this thief.
Yep, exactly. And they're creating full-time service departments and organizations, right? They have outreach. They want to get in contact with their victims. They want to coax their victims into thinking, okay, they have a bad situation, but it could get worse, but they're going to help them with it. As far as, going as far as to offer consulting services, right? I mean, if you pay us an additional price, they literally have a la carte, almost like SKUs, different pricing models, right? You buy this, okay, we'll give you access to your IT systems back, but we're also going to tell you how we got into those systems so you can fix the holes and hey, maybe hire us full time in the future.
And I hear for an additional fee, they'll vouch that from a confidentiality, integrity, and availability perspective, that your data wasn't compromised. It wasn't altered in any way. That you're getting back your full data set or the full decryption key. They're not going to release any part of your data. I mean, that's pretty brazen, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and they're being bold, and they're actually they're walking the walk. They're not just talking the talk. We've seen cases where when organizations won't pay the ransom, that they will actually start to leak information to public forums and sites, and there's also sales happening on the dark web too.
Yeah, so I've seen that too. So yeah, so that's just a lot of good news on these calls, isn't it? So what's someone supposed to do about this now? You know, we've been down this road. You and I have been talking about this for almost a decade or more now, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're seeing it, the more pervasive we are in terms of our interconnected society and our economy, that the potential impact of these types of attacks has grown tremendously. Are we still talking about basics in security to address this, or what are your thoughts next?
The basics always apply, but the reality is that's not good enough anymore. It goes a long way, yes. The basics would cover those attacks that we were talking about 10 years ago because they weren't targeted. They're just a volumetric attacks. And don't click on that link. Look at the link. You know, don't look at the domain before you click on it. Don't open up unsolicited attachments. All of that still applies. But the reality, Jonathan, is now because of the funding and organization, these cybercrime groups really are. It's a blur now between APT groups. Of course, APT groups are nation state, heavily funded groups that do full out reconnaissance, weaponization, creating new zero-day exploits as an example, knowing their targets, getting into networks, sitting on there, collecting information, using that to actually find out what those targets are. That's happening with these ransom attacks. So when it comes to what do we do about it, we really have to look at the cyber kill chain, right? In terms of defense in depth, there's no silver bullet to these. And it's especially important because this is a reality. We need to be able to be careful about blueprints we expose to networks because those can be, cyber criminals looking for open ports and services, training and education, of course, for employees, but then also getting into everything from, EDR and XDR to be able to detect those zero-day exploits that are happening with these ransom campaigns, all the way to the right, which gets to the, incident response and planning too. So it's a holistic approach.
Yeah. So you and I both read the adversaries' playbooks because we know they read our playbooks, right? And so when you look at the adversaries' playbook, what the word that comes to me is persistence. And it sounds like what you're describing is that we need to establish persistence on this side of the fence so that you can detect those nuances, those things that are anomalous, that may be malicious, things in which you can apply AI and other tools to try to distill down some insight that gets us a little bit left of the detonation, right?
Yeah, definitely. Good world-class threat intelligence like we work on here at FortiGuard Labs. Like we always talk about, you can't protect against what you can't see. So it's really important to have those visibility points, inspection points, leverage the ML AI. Absolutely. And the persistence is a big part, right? That's the reality. If you look at, the cost of a data breach report that's put out yearly, that dwell time that these threats are sitting on a network is over 200 days. That's too long, right?
Yeah, the other thing I think is pretty telling is that dark web through formal and informal teaming arrangements is pretty effective as bringing buyers and sellers, for bringing these syndicates together to launch these attacks. I mean, every step of that kill chain you described is now available as a service on the dark web.
Yeah, and this is what I refer to as the attack chain. It's just the inverse, right? It's literally take a mirror, apply it to it, look at the inverse, right? Everything that we do on the defensive side, they do on the offensive side. And that's the whole playbook discussion, of course, and understanding that. Yeah. It's also important to understand, because of the organization of these gangs now and the ransomware groups, it's not just one or two people behind this. We're tracking 40, 50 people. You get the money launderers involved, these business units. They have a supply chain of their own, and that supply chain is fueling this, right? So it gets into that same idea with the kill chain. Anywhere that you can intercept that supply chain, i.e., like you said, pre-detonation, trying to actually stop those attacks, it's hitting them where it hurts, right? It's a cost to them. And
every time I look at your research and the stuff that's out there in our industry, it always points down to that lack of visibility. The inability to see what's on the endpoint, inability to see what's on that LAN edge, the WAN edge, the data center edge, and the cloud edge, right? Because everything is still kind of siloed. So I see an adversary community that looks at a broad landscape and then drills down, right, from networks to systems to individuals. Yeah. And on this side of the fence, I still see teams struggling to have cross-platform visibility. I think in my discussions, that seems to be one of the biggest problems today. And we're still thinking about computing, networking, and security as separate stacks.
Yeah, and in reality, that's not the way attackers and network traffic flows move through system. I mean, they're flows. It's a flow, so it's not siloed. It's moving through these points. You need intelligence and inspection and interoperability and integration like we do in the fabric throughout those points. That's the only way you're going to be able to trace through this attack chain. And then obviously once you see it, you can kill it. And that's the idea of the kill chain, right?
Right. And if you can't see it, you can't really detect it. You can't protect it.
Yeah.
Stop the attack in its tracks.
Not without unplugging everything in your network. And that obviously isn't feasible, right? So.
Yeah. And so I think for me, one of the takeaways I talk to CISOs about is that, hey, if you don't really have a good understanding of what's happening in your network, when one of these incidents occur, what are you going to do? Can you confidently run your OT environment if you don't understand what's happening? The attack may be an IT environment, it may be on the business side, but if you don't have visibility into your OT and your IT side, do you, as a precaution, shut down your OT network? And the answer, I think, is yes, unless you have visibility, right? It's not reasonable to do otherwise. But that's like that old parable about, for the cost of a nail, the shoe fell off the horse fell and killed the king, right?
Right. Yeah, dependencies, right? And that's reality with these business streams that they rely on. So a lot of the times, like there's been documented cases of massive service outages that come down to one system because of a patching issue. Right? It's a single point of failure in a sense. And that could definitely happen with IT systems. And so,
gosh, Derek, when I started in this industry back in 1990 something, we were still talking about the same things. And it just seems to me that, we haven't made a lot of progress in many ways on this side of the fence and on the defender side, but the adversaries have gotten a lot faster. They seem to be utilizing technology better, and they seem to be leveraging their ecosystem in a far more effective way than we are on this side of the table, right?
Yeah, they enjoy a lot of benefits that way, right? I mean, they don't have jurisdictions, they don't have policy, they don't have ethics, right?
Really?
So they, other than these fronts that they say, hey, we're going to help you and charge you for consulting services and help your business out after we've held you hostage for ransom.
I just thought those were Canadian hackers because they're so polite. They're willing to do things like that. So
we don't have any of those here in Canada.
So we're coming to the end of our session. If you were giving advice right now to a CISO leadership team, give me 3 things that you absolutely have to think about if you're going to effectively, combat this type of threat.
Yeah. So just, obviously think of the basics of patching, all those things we talk about, but in reality, that's not good enough. You have to go that extra mile for looking at the full kill chain, everything from what you can do, what we call shifting left. So looking at the, pre-detonation execution of code. So that's the blueprinting, covering all the patches and updates you can, educating your workforce, like we have with our information security and awareness and NSC program. All of that is very important. But then at the same time, having that integration we talked about, no single point of failure, integration, threat intelligence applied to all of that and updated. Because threat intelligence can get old after a day. So updated threat intelligence baked in to your solution points, but then make it actionable, right? Be able to follow up on that. That's where you can leverage like the fabric and machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's all really important for the mitigation piece. But then lastly, it's just, you mentioned this earlier, the what if scenarios. Those are critically important as well. Understanding those dependencies in between different assets and business streams, and being able to come up with good SOPs, security operation planning, for if and when an attack does occur.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like the level of complexity you just described is so overwhelming. I just don't see how any in-house team in and of itself could handle that much of the task.
Well, you can't with silos. It's too hard if everything's siloed. But again, that's when we come down to single pane of glass architecture, that integration point, centralized threat reporting as an example. That is key, because without that, you're just trying to find the needle in the haystack.
Yeah, I think to be really effective, to bring all those elements of prevention, detection, and response together with AI is an extraordinary level of complexity and requires an integrated approach. I think of it as playing chess against not only one computer, but 100 computers.
Yeah.
And trying to think 5 steps ahead against 100 computers, which are thinking 10 steps ahead.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason why you really need that fabric-based approach, because the level of persistence, the level of complexity, and the speed at which it's operating is just incredible. I mean, from an MSS side of the house, which was my bailiwick, we went from SLAs from hours to minutes to now with 5G ecosystems, we're at sub-milliseconds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that challenge is what's going to happen.
And that's an important piece is if we look at that attack chain we're talking about, it's literally a clock, right? It starts ticking all the way that it starts from execution. Again, that can be 200 days in some case or more, but it starts ticking. And the further you can actually stop that, so that's the kill chain, stop it closer to the left. Yes, there might be some damage done already at that point, but it's nearly not. It's going to be as bad as if you let it go all the way through, right?
Yeah, and that's really my final tip of the day, is that after everything, you may want to consider some threat research to figure out if there's anybody asking about your company, your brand, your leadership. Go to that dark web pawn shop, as it were. And even before the reconnaissance begins, just find out if anyone's even asking about you. I think that's a precautionary step we need to take as well now.
Yeah, understanding if you're a target and who's targeting you, definitely.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks, Derek. It's been great catching up with you. And this is just another session of Fortinet Live, where we've discussed what's happening in ransomware and how do you go about effectively defending against that. Again, my name is Jonathan Nguyen. Thanks very much for your time today.
Always good, Jonathan. Thank you.
Yeah, man.